All right, everybody, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I don't know how many people we have on the call today, but this is being recorded, so if you guys have to leave at any time or lose connection, you can always find the webinar at Dynamics Care. So my name is Kalyn Kelly. I'm a consultant here at I.B.I.S, and I'm going to talk to you today about inventory cycle counting. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First question you're going to ask yourself is, why do I want a cycle count? What's the point of it? Why is it there? So primarily, here are the reasons that people use cycle counting: to get a more accurate inventory quantity. And that will help to maintain your on-hand inventory, to make sure you don't sell things that you don't have or buy more things when you have plenty in stock. You can also manually count throughout the year instead of doing a giant full end of year count, which can be very cumbersome, can take a lot of time, and you basically have to shut down your facility when all of your stock counters are counting at the end of the year. Another thing that's helpful with stock counting is the adjustments that are automatically created based on any variance from the stock counting. So if there are any differences, you can tell right away based on the adjustment transactions that are created. And the final thing that most people use it for is for a constant verification of their inventory value. A lot of times the inventory account is going to be the largest part of your balance sheet, so it's important to make sure that that is accurate so you have a very good grasp on your dollar value. So how do I do a cycle count? Stock counting and cycle counting, that's the difference between the GP name and the trade name. I'll probably flip-flop between the two names, but they're basically the same thing. So the first thing I need to do is set up a stock count calendar, which is going to be a system setup. You'll have to do that once. You don't have to do that every time you create a cycle count. And then you'll create your stock count schedule, or you can use an existing one. If you have one that you use regularly, you can continue to use it. Then you're going to print the actual forms that can be used to walk around your facility and manually write down how many you have of each. Then you'll want to actually count the inventory, and then come back to GP and enter the quantities on hand. And then after you process your cycle count, the adjustments will be posted. A transaction will be created for any variances that need to be adjusted in the system. Based on your posting setup, these variances will either be posted to inventory, and then you'll have to post them again to the general ledger, or if you have post through set on, then they will hit straight to the GL. So the first thing you need to do is get to the stock count calendar window, and you can do that by going through the area panes or the toolbars in GP. If you use the area panes, it's going to be in the inventory section under setup, and if you're using the toolbars at the very top, it's going to be in the Dynamics GP tools setup inventory window. And this will be a one-time thing. You might want to adjust it, and if the future maybe you are working Saturdays and then you switch and you don't work Saturdays anymore, you'll need to update your calendar. But this is a company setup, so you can have different calendars based on different companies. So here's a screenshot of what that window looks like. The things that you're able to set in this calendar are the working days and the non-working days. You can select using the radio button if you work Sundays and Saturdays. You can also choose what kind of shifts you have set up. If you only have one shift and it starts at 8 a.m., or if you have multiple shifts or 3 shifts throughout the night. You can also choose the number of hours per shift. So if it's always an 8-hour shift, or if you have 10-hour shifts, you can enter that here. And the next thing you're going to do is set up your stock count. And the navigation for this using the area panes is in the transactions for under inventory. And if you're using the toolbars, you'll go straight to transactions and then inventory and the stock count schedule. And this is where you create the schedule of items that you would like to count. And here's a screenshot of what that window looks like. So you always have to have a stock count ID. It's best to name it something logical. Stock count is really not helpful if you're in a production environment. You might want to name it something based on the items that you're looking at. Maybe if you're looking at one particular site, you would name your stock count ID that site. If these are one-time only stock counts, it might be a good idea to put the date in the stock count ID so that you keep track of when you're creating the stock count. The description is optional if you want to put more information in that field based on why you're doing the count, how often you do this count. The default site ID is a default, so it's optional. This will improve your processing. It'll make things a lot quicker if you are in the same site for all of your counting. And you can add items one at a time using the lookup magnifying glass. If you're using multiple bins, you can select which bin you would like to count at a time. And that's also on the item level. So it's an item, bin, site combination. So you're going all the way to that specific item at that site and at that bin location. You can also do a mass add of items. And this is the mass add window. You can select a range. The things that you have available to select a range of include the next cycle count date, the site ID, the ABC code, the item class, item number, generic description, regular description, type, and bin if you have multiple bins turned on. You would then insert the range and add to your cycle count. If you include an ABC code, for example, and a site, the result will pull in only the items that have that ABC code at that site. So it's going to join all that criteria together. Then you can select and it will populate onto your cycle counting schedule. The unit of measure is going to default from the item, so whatever the base item unit of measure is will be your stock count schedule unit of measure. When you select, when you are doing a stock count, there are 3 different statuses that a stock count can have. If it's available, it will be in the stock count schedule window, the window we just looked at, and you can add items or remove them from this window. If you select the start count, it will then be available in the entry window where you can enter the item quantities. If you need to cancel the stock count for some reason, maybe you aren't ready to cycle count for that day, or maybe you forgot to add or forgot to remove an item, you can cancel the stock count from the schedule window. After a stock count has been started, you cannot add or remove the items, and you would enter your items in the entry window. When you're all done, you would select process, and that would be considered an entered stock count. At that time, items cannot be added or removed, but you can clear if you need to go back and re-enter any items. The stock count can be reused if you select the reuse stock count checkbox, and that will put it back into the schedule window that you can use it again in the future. If you have a particular ABC code that you like to count often, you might want to reuse that stock count so that you can just pick the stock count and start it instead of creating a new ID and adding all of the items manually. After you select start on a stock count, it will print an exception report, and it will print any issues that it found while it was trying to start the stock count. So for example, things that you cannot do at the same time as cycle counting are reconciling utilities, if you're changing valuation methods, if you're changing any decimal places, or if you're processing the year-end close. Those things are not available to be done at the same time as cycle counting, and you will get an error message, an error prompt, when you select Start. An exception report will print if there are any kind of overlapping issues that will allow you to cancel your stock count. For example, you cannot have a started stock count with the same item, site, bin combination. So if you are already counting that location, you can't count it a second time on a different stock count. You have to finish the first one, and then you can count it again. You also cannot count any item types that are not available to be cycle counted. That includes a kit, service, miscellaneous, or flat fee item. So you can only count regular items. When you select the Start button, this stock count print options window is going to appear, and you can print a couple different things, including the stock count list. It's important to note that that stock count list can be printed at any time. When you are creating your stock count, maybe your list of items got too long and you want to review it, you can print that list using the printer icon. You can also sort by site ID, bin, or item number in any of those orders. So if you wanted to print item number, then bin, then site ID, you could choose that from the drop-down list. After you click the Start button, the stock count forms will be available to be printed. And there are a couple options that you can use here. You can create a page break between items if you have a lot of items and you would prefer to kind of split up the work and hand it to a couple different people to count. You can also print the on-hand quantities. This is an option because some people don't want to know what's currently in the bin or what the system thinks is in the bin. This often keeps your counters from fudging the numbers. If they don't feel like counting all the locations, they might just write down all of the on-hand quantities. Typically, people choose not to print the on-hand quantities just so the counting actually occurs. You can print the item, lot, or serial numbers as well if you want to make sure that all of your serial numbers are present in that particular location. So after you started your stock count, you would want to go to the stock count entry window, and this is where you would enter in the actual quantities. So this will also be in the transaction area right under the schedule. And you can get there going to the transactions inventory stock count entry. So this window looks very similar to the schedule window. I have my ID, description, and the status, whether or not it's started, entered. You also have a document date. This is what's going to be used to post into inventory. It's going to default to the date that you press Start on the stock count. And if you want it to be a different date, you can use that blue lookup button and adjust the date. The auto post stock count variance checkbox is going to post any of the variances automatically. If you have that deselected, it will create an inventory batch that you need to manually post. If the reuse stock count box is checked, that means that after you're done processing the stock count, it's going to return to the schedule window and you'll be allowed to use it again in the future. You'll also notice that there is a unit of measure blue lookup button here, blue extension button. And this is going to allow you to enter in a different unit of measure than is available on the stock count entry screen. So for this example, I have some forks that are located in my storage location, and I have a variety of unit of measures that they're stored in. So I have 3 12-packs, 5 6-packs, and then 6 random forks laying around. They're not in a package. So I can enter all of those different unit of measures because I have all of those on hand, but I don't want to sit and count the 12 pack to make sure that I have 12 forks. I know there's 12, it's a sealed package. So I can enter different unit of measures at the same time. The next thing I can do is change the distribution on any particular item. So if I would prefer that this item, this green phone, the variance go to a different account because I know what happened to this item, someone threw it against the wall and it broke. Well, I don't want it to go to the regular variance column because I want to research it a little bit more. I can change the GL account that it gets booked to. Another thing to note here is the account result. So if anyone is more on the inventory side and less on the accounting side, if you find a new item, so if it's an increase adjustment, there are more available than the system thought, it's going to debit your inventory and credit your variance. If you lost some items, the quantity is going to decrease and it's going to credit inventory and debit your variance. I also have the shortcut keys on each of these slides if you prefer to use a shortcut to get to the distribution window from the stock count entry window. You would just select Alt-B. The stock count serial lot window is going to allow you to enter any serial number specific information for that item. This window will only be available if you have serial or lot numbers turned on, and depending on which kind of item it is, it'll open either the serial window or the lot window. And this is where you'll be required to enter any information for items that have a serial or lot number. You cannot enter them in the regular entry window. You'll have to choose the serial number that you found in that particular location. A S/L icon will appear next to the item in the entry window if you have to enter the item information in the serial lot number window. If you created or started a stock count entry before you actually got around to counting the items, things might have changed in the system. It is a snapshot when you hit start on that stock count. So if there are any unposted transactions, that might show a discrepancy in your items. Maybe you have a staging area, and if there is a item on order that has not been posted yet, the item could be moved to the staging area, and so it wouldn't show up in the particular bin that you're cycle counting. And then you can look in this window and find any documents that are assigned to that item number. You can also view a history of that item. And we'll stay on that same example. If you are stock counting kind of late, you forgot to cycle count one that you started on Friday, and someone posted a transaction and shipped it out the door in an emergency on Saturday, you could go back and look at the history and make sure that you know what happened to that item and kind of do a little investigation before you're ready to commit to that item missing. In the stock count entry window, you have a couple different quantities. The first is captured. That's going to be the quantity at the time that the stock count had started. It's going to be a point in time capture. Your on-hand quantity is going to be transactions posted after the count has started. So if you have transactions that occur throughout your cycle counting process, the variance quantity is going to be the counted quantity minus the captured quantity. If the variance is larger than the on-hand quantity, the variance will be reduced until the on-hand quantity is 0. So it won't go negative, it will go to 0 if anything happens. When I am done counting, I would select the process button. And what that's going to do is post any adjustments that were made as a result of the stock count. A batch of I.B.I.S will be created, so that's the inventory stock count ID, and it will contain any of the adjusting transactions to inventory. They will have a type of variance. So in the item transaction entry window, I can look them up by variance. The batch type is going to be an inventory transaction journal. And after posting to the GL, a batch will be called IVIDJ, so inventory adjustment, if you need to go back and research any of these transactions. The inquiry windows are going to be in inventory. So the item transaction inquiry is going to be the inquiry used from sales, purchasing, and inventory. You'll be able to see all of the activity on that item. The stock count transaction document with a type of variance. The inventory transaction inquiry is going to show specific variance transactions. So one particular cycle count can show all the different items that were affected. In the item inquiry window is where you would look to see the last cycle counted date. So I can run a smart list or use the lookup window to see the last time that account was done on that item. And that'll also allow me to keep track of how often I'm counting. I can create an assignment using cards. The area panes, I can go to inventory, card, cycle count assignment, or straight from the card menu on the toolbar. And this will allow me to set a particular assignment to an item. And this is helpful when I am adding a new schedule. I can create next count date, and it'll pull in any items that are due for counting. So I will set my interval days. So every 60 days, in this example, I would want to count a particular range of items. Now this is going to take your items and spread them evenly over the 60 days. So if I have 60 items in a site location, it will count one per day. And the reason it does this is so that your resources that are actually doing the counting don't have to count all items on one day every 60 days. They count one item for 60 days and then start all over again on the 61st day. So this is a screenshot of a single item, and I got to this window by going to the cards inventory quantity site stock count button. And it's going to show me the last time that this item was counted, the interval until it's supposed to be counted the next time, and the next count date that's been assigned. I can manually change this on an item if I need to. So if I have set an assignment and I want to adjust it for one particular item that I care a lot about and I want to count it more frequently, I can manually change it for a particular item. There are also a bunch of reports. I'm not really going to go over each of these because you won't know what they are until you need them. During my example, I'll kind of go through a couple of the reports, but these are the navigation paths on how to get to them. So I have an example in GP that I'd like to go over for a couple minutes. So in GP, I have set up a sample company for tailgating. It's fall, a lot of people are into tailgating right now, so I thought it'd be a great realistic example. So the reason I want a cycle count for my tailgating equipment is because every week I have to make sure that I'm prepared. I don't want to assume that I have all of my materials when I'm missing something. And sometimes things go missing. If I'm packing up my car late at night and we forget a pile of forks, they ended up in the trash can somehow, I want to make sure that I know that they're gone. This will also assist in my shopping list for the coming weekend, because I want to make sure to buy all those items and only go to the store once. So I'm going to jump out of my PowerPoint here and go to GP. So I'm going to navigate. I use the area panes mostly, and this is GP 2013 for anyone that's not on GP 2013. The stock count windows should be very similar, if not exactly the same, to a couple of the previous versions. These area panes are going to look a little bit different for anyone that's on GP 10 or 2010. I use the area panes. Every once in a while I'll go up here and use the toolbars too, just so no one feels left out. If I'm in the inventory pane, I need to, of course, first in my setup, set my stock calendar. So in my football company, I am not going to count anything on Saturday and Sunday because those are the days that I'm going to be watching football, so I don't want to do any work. But Monday through Friday is fine for me to do any cycle counting. So after I set that up once, I'm done. I can also go ahead and look into the future, into December. If I know that I'm not going to be counting on Christmas, I can close these days, and that will make them down days because they are highlighted in the black. And it will skip over those days and not require any cycle counting to occur. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is go to my transactions and set up my cycle count schedule. I already have a few out here, and I can look to see any ones that I've done in the past. So I have one set for A-type items. I am using the ABC codes. If anyone needs help setting up ABC codes, there's an ABC wizard, or of course you can contact I.B.I.S to let us assist you with that. I can see the status and the date that it was last used, so the last time that I used that particular stock count ID. I have one set up for my important items. I'm always going to check my fridge, and I'm always going to check my storage room. So if I take a look at the A-type items, this is a list of the things that I care the most about. The site IDs, where they're located, their default unit of measures. If I drop down my chevron here to show more detail, I will see the description for that item, as well as a bin if the bin is turned on. In my current system, it's not. And the last time that it was counted. If it's overdue, there's going to be a checkbox here to show that this item should have been counted before now. So I really need to go ahead and count it. I'm going to click save on this item, and I'm going to do that again as a demo. So if I wanted to do A types, these are my A type items. And I'm going to do the mass add because I don't really know all of my A type items off the top of my head. But in the mass add window, I can select a range using my ABC code. And I can choose A. I can also do the same thing for any other ABC code or any of these other range options. So I could also do next stock count date if I have them assigned to the items to make sure that I get everything that's supposed to be counted up until today. I can also do a particular item class if I always want to make sure that my beverage class is cycle counted. I can do that. So I'm going to use my ABC code A and add, and that's going to pull in all of my items that have ABC code of A. I can also go and add more items using mass add or using the lookup button to add a particular item. So maybe I want all A items plus the bean bags. I want to make sure that I count those. And the site ID. I will only see the site ID that these items are in. And I can also see my quantity on hand right now. I also have this checked to reuse my stock count, so in the future if I want to reuse this, I just have to pull it up again and start counting. When I'm ready to start counting, I'm going to click this Start Count button. I do want to save my changes, and this is going to print my stock count exception list. I'm just going to look at it on the screen for right now. And I want to print my stock count forms, and I don't want any of these selections, so I'm not going to check anything, but I would like it sorted by item number, site, and then bin. And this is going to choose where I want my stock count forms to go, and again I'm just going to look at them on the screen. So no exceptions were found, there weren't any issues. So I don't have any started stock counts with any of these items already. So this is going to allow my stock count to be started. This is my stock count form. This can be printed out and handed to the person that would physically walk over and count that location. You'll see there's a place for them to enter the counted quantity, the unit of measure that they found it in, the date, and the time. So this will show my item number and any sites that they're located. I have ice located in fridge and storage. Possibly I have ice in the freezer, more technically, and then inside of a cooler in my storage location. So I would want to count both of those locations. From this window, I can also print it. Anyone that doesn't have GP 2013, this is an awesome feature. I can now choose my printer when I am printing, which is the best thing ever. Really, really cool for anyone considering an upgrade to GP 2013. Alright, so now on this screen, my only option is to cancel the count or to save it. So if I wanted to cancel the count, I would have to come back into this screen and cancel it. But I'm happy with it, I'm ready to count. So I'm going to save it and close this window. The next place I'm going to go is my stock count entry window. And from here, if I go to my lookup, I will only see the stock counts that are started. If you remember, we had 3 other stock count IDs, but they're not started yet, so I'm not allowed to enter the item quantities. So I'm going to pull up my A types and select. And here you'll see that I have the option to look at the items by site ID bin then item number, or by item number site ID bin, or by their description. So I can sort these a couple different ways. I only have a few items here, but if you had a lot of items in the cycle count, that could be very handy. So if I look at my details, I'm going to drop down my chevrons here. I have my ice in my fridge location, and I can see the captured quantity and the on-hand quantity. And based on these quantities, the captured quantity is going to be the quantity at the day that I hit start on my cycle count. And the on-hand would pull in any posted transactions that have occurred in the meantime of me counting. If I know that I have 73 eaches, so whatever my unit of measure for ice is, it could be a bag would be my each. I can type in 73. And it'll choose this verified box for me. I have no variance because I know that I have all the ice that I think I have. If I go down here to bean bags, maybe I have 9 bean bags. We found one on the ground while we were leaving the tailgate the other week, and we didn't want to leave it behind. So that's going to calculate a variance quantity of 1 for me. I can go look at my distributions now and verify that it's going to go to the right place. And I can also double check any unposted transactions here to make sure that there aren't any items out in the system that are going to use this item. I can also look at my transaction history to see what happened. If I look at my all document dates, I would see anything in the past. Since this is a demo system, I haven't done a lot of transactional level entries. If I want to look at my ice in storage, for example, there's none in storage, so I don't have any coolers full. So this is going to be 0. If I have anything above 0, it's going to create a variance. If I leave it at 0, and I don't check this box, I won't be able to process my stock count. Every item has to be verified. So I have to verify that there are no ice in my storage location. So I need to check this box to say, nope, I didn't find any. So after I'm done verifying all of my quantities, I'm just, for the sake of example, going to say that none of these existed. So I lost my TV and my satellite. It was just a really bad weekend. My grill went missing. We lost our cornhole boards and half of our chairs. If I want to change the date, again, I can use this blue lookup button and adjust the date of the stock count. That'll be the date that it hits my inventory. So I'm going to select process. This is going to show me any exceptions that occurred during the cycle count. And it'll tell me the batch IDs that were created. So it created a variance transaction 1, and the batch ID is inventory stock count 1. So I can go to my inventory batches, and I can look up this batch that was just created with my variances. If I select it, I can see that there's one transaction with a quantity of 14. I'm going to print the edit list on this so I can see exactly what's inside of my batch. And you'll see that I found a cornhole bean bag. I lost 8 of my chairs. I lost my cornhole boards, my grill, my satellite, and my TV. This will show the offset accounts that it's going to. And if I had put in a unit cost, it would show the extended cost that would hit those accounts. So I'm just going to post this transaction. And it will print me a posting journal. And this will show my variance and what happened to it. It'll also print any of the journals that you have set up for that particular inventory report. And then any audit trail reports. So now if I wanted to look at the inquiries, I can look at a particular item, and I'm going to look at my TV. And it was located in my storage location. If I look at the stock count button, it's going to show me the last time that it was counted, so that would be today, and the next time that it's expected to count, because I have it set up to be stock counted every day. I want to make sure that TV is there every day. And again, I'm in the inquiry window. If I went to the transaction window for this item, I can adjust those fields. I can also look at the item. I clicked a little fast there. Let me go back. If I go to my Go To button, I can go to the item stock inquiry, and this will show me how often and when this item was counted. So there's a variance transaction created on today with a quantity of 1, and it will show all of the audit trail information. If I wanted to print a report, and again, anyone that's not familiar with GP 2013, you can take a look at the new features. So I can print a particular report to view my items instead of going to my stock count lookup windows. So if I go to my activity reports, I have a stock count list as well as a historical stock count report that I can print. The stock count list is basically going to print anything from my stock count schedule window. If I go over to my transaction stock count schedule, printing that report is going to be the same thing as clicking the print icon button from this window. The other thing I can choose is a historical stock status. If I look at the detail of that report, I can see that I have my regular reporting options. I'm going to choose the destination of screen for an example here. And I'm going to choose today as my as of date. And since I have not posted that batch all the way through, I'm not going to see the quantities affected here. But this will show me any of my historical stock count reports. I can also go to Smart List under Inventory and under my items. I can look at my items overdue for stock count, and this will show me any items that should be counted. It'll show the last counted date, the next counted date, and their current quantities. And I can use this list to determine what I've missed, what needs to be counted. I also have an items due to be counted, and since these have an asterisk by them, these are defaulted from the system. They're already here. You don't have to do any work to get them. All right, so that pretty much wraps up what I was planning to say about stock count. If you have any questions, please email info@ibisinc.com. So again, that's info@ibisinc.com. And I will be sure to follow up with you there. Thanks for attending, everybody, and I hope you have a great day.